Hi everybody, and welcome to this webinar about modern backups and disaster recovery with Veeam and SherWeb. I'm your host, Guillaume Boisvert. Today we have some very special guests directly from Veeam Software, Joel Wolverton, the Territory Manager for the Northeast, and Michael Stuparts, Senior System Engineer. I also have with me my lovely assistant, Peter, who will be manning the questions and slides. And hopefully you'll have a good time with us. So let's get started right now with the agenda. Actually, before I get started with the agenda, a couple of housekeeping items. This webinar is being recorded. It will be sent to you whether you attend the old webinar, or if you leave, or if you have to go to lunch or whatever. We forgive you. That's okay. We understand. You'll receive the link in the next 24 to 48 hours. As well, anybody that registered and didn't attend will receive the link as well. There is a box for asking questions built into the webinar software, so if you have any questions, please don't hesitate. Type it into the QA section. We try to reserve question and answers to the end. Looking at the schedule and the content, we should have enough time to answer some questions when we get to the end of the presentation. That being said, let's get started. So the content today of this presentation, first we'll talk about the opportunity for you as a SherWeb partner to make money with disaster recovery. Then we'll talk about what is Veeam Cloud Connect and Replication. I'll give you a bit of information about the SherWeb infrastructure. The reason that we go into that particular subject is because our Veeam Cloud Connect offering is built on top of our SherWeb Performance Cloud Infrastructure as a Service. Then I'll pass the mic over to the fine folks from Veeam, and they'll talk about who is Veeam and their partner program, which should be of interest to you as well. We'll talk about a couple of next steps, and then we'll get to question and answers. With that, we'll get to the first question of our. This is a new thing for us, so we try to now ask a few questions of our attendees, see how they fit with the content and how they like the presentation. You now see the first question. Do your clients have a disaster recovery plan? So if you can simply select a answer, we'll give you a few seconds. The idea is to get an idea of context with everybody. So we'll give you just a few more seconds to answer. Okay. So there you go. You should be seeing the results now. So to the question, do your clients have a disaster recovery plan? We can see that some people, the vast majority would be that some clients do, some clients don't. And still a few people just don't. I would say, I would venture a guess, and obviously this is just a guess, that the reason that some of your clients don't is financially related. A lot of people, the main hurdle to doing a disaster recovery, other than technical limitations and planning and resources, it becomes just a financial question. The reason that we're here today and the reason that we've associated ourselves so closely with Veeam is because they address a lot of the gaps that have been present in the, let's say, classic or traditional disaster recovery product and services. So, going back to the presentation, what is the opportunity for a partner such as yourself? I would venture that most of you are managed service provider if we look at our other webinars. Here's a few things. So 70% of company will be using cloud services in the next 12 months, so that just gives you a sense of the overall. The cloud market will double in the next 3 years according to IDC. And by 2019, 40% of software revenue will be subscription billed. As SherWeb partners, I think those facts are things that you're mostly aware of. What will get more interesting for you is 40% of companies never recover from a disaster. That means that once they suffered through a disaster, they basically close shop. 65% of them, or another 25% of company, are closed within a year. So we could fairly say that 65% of companies never recover from a disaster, and that's major. That's something very scary, and if your clients haven't thought of that, they probably should. 50% of SMBs have no disaster recovery plan. I think that seems to align with our survey answers today. Average length of a stoppage is 2.2 days in relation to disasters. And all those things point to the fact that a large amount of opportunity remains. I would say even more specifically, as we modernize our offering and services, for a lot of people, when we're talking about disaster recovery, it's, the secretary or the owner leaves with a USB drive every once in a while if he doesn't forget. That's not bad. I mean, I would say that is a disaster recovery plan. It's leaps and bounds better than no disaster recovery plan, but still there's a lot better that can be done. So there are many possibilities when we're talking about disaster recovery. It starts with simple offsite backups, such as tapes or disks. But quickly, people are when they look into it, people are quick to realize that they should go with something a bit more modern. And then we're talking about online backups as the first step to that, often referred to nowadays as cloud backups. Just about everything now is called cloud something, so backups didn't want to be left out. When we're talking about file-level backups, then there's a number of offerings. A couple of examples would be Acronis or something like SherWeb Online Backup. When we're talking about image-level backup, or I'd say best of breed is something like Veeam Cloud Connect. So what's the difference between the two? It's fairly simple. When we're talking about image-level backup, we're talking about backing up a whole server, and rather than doing it at the file level, we're talking about backing up the whole image. So more and more of people infrastructures are virtualized. When I was talking to a partner at a recent event, webinar that we have with in person, 90 to 95% of our partners were dealing with virtualization, which is not a surprise. It fits industry numbers and everything. But what that points to is that more and more a image level backup becomes the way to go. When we take it up another level, then we're talking about replication. And again, there are two ways to do replication. You can do an app level replication, which means that software by software, you figure out how you want to replicate to another server. If we're talking, for example, SQL, there's a number of functionality within SQL to build replication, be it always on or clustering or log shipping. App level replication is what was very popular for a number of years. I'd say complexity is what drove most people off, and also the cost of having that second infrastructure to replicate to. Nowadays, we're talking about image level replication when it comes to replication as well. The new feature starting with Veeam 9 is Cloud Connect replication. So instead of just making offsite backup, you can actually replicate to a service provider. And we'll talk about that in more detail within this presentation. The Cadillac of disaster recovery is the hot site. Basically what that means is you have a copy of your infrastructure running with all your services running, and you're ready to flip to it at a moment's notice. That used to be the sort of the gold standard. There is a lot of costs associated. Basically, when we're pricing out this type of disaster recovery for a client, we're calculating about 100 to 125% of his current cost. So you're basically doubling up on infrastructure, plus you're adding the complexity of having that replication. Not a bad solution if you're somebody that has to be live all the time, like can only lose a few seconds while you flip over to this new infrastructure, or even dynamically have both sides running. But with Veeam Cloud Connect replication, it is becoming a choice for fewer and fewer people because of its cost and complexity. So we're going to be talking about disaster recovery today. We have a document that was created specifically for our partners to help them discuss disaster recovery and build a plan with their client. It is not a sales document. It is really a document to evaluate different possibilities, to help with some of the more forgotten aspects of disaster recovery. I invite you, since you're already partners, to go to your toolbox in the Performance Cloud section and to look for the disaster recovery planning guide and to give that a good read. I think that's probably the best place to start with your clients, the content of that document, which is establishing a plan, giving responsibility to different individuals to review the processes. If you approach the client with just, hey, you should pay for a disaster recovery service, you may or may not get a positive answer. If you approach them as, what are we going to do if there is a disaster? Let's build a plan together. Let me give you value by bringing the expertise, making it as simple and painless as possible. That's much more likely to get a positive response for your client, and you don't really have to worry. Part of that will be acquiring more services, split between services like the ones that SherWeb offer, but also time, like hourly billing from you as a service provider. Okay. What is VM backups with Veeam Cloud Connect at SherWeb? Here's a very simple diagram. Basically, you can take on-premise servers or hosted servers, and then you can connect them to our Veeam Cloud Connect gateway and store the data in our Veeam Cloud repository. At SherWeb, there is a bit more to it than that. We're hosting that in our SherWeb Performance Cloud, and I'm going to talk about what that means to you as a user. But also, it gives us the ability to recover VMs that have been backed up to our Cloud Connect product as live active servers on Performance Cloud. So let's talk about that for just a second. Most providers will give you basically a cloud repository. So you can store your files, and the day that you need them, you can retrieve them to a on-premise solution and restore your machines. Let's talk about most common disaster situation, which is, let's say, fire. Your on-premise location and infrastructure is burned down by fire. The time to retrieve equivalent hardware, and then you have to download all of your machines and then put them back up on that particular infrastructure, it can be a long time, depending on the amount of data, the connection speed, the time to provision those servers. If you look at Dell, where you could be talking about 4 weeks to get servers, that's a major problem. The alternative is to have full physical servers waiting for you, but that we're talking about a lot of expenses. So what we're introducing to the conversation is we have spare capacity. I'm an infrastructure as a service provider. I always have spare capacity. That's the name of the business. So you just have to get and pay for offsite backup through our Cloud Connect, and you have access to restoring those machines directly into the Performance Cloud, because I have spare capacity as an infrastructure as a service provider. Basically what we're saying is we're giving you, and you have the ability to give your client, a cold DR site at no cost at all. And that is a bit of a game changer. It is a bit something exceptional. So for the cost of offsite backup, I get a cold DR site. That should be an easy sell for your client. You should have that conversation with them, and they should be very interested. It is not the same as having a hot DR site, having a full, but it is also just a fraction of the cost. So a bit of a more of a bullet description of it is basically you can connect any on-premise or hosted Veeam backup setup to SherWeb. And we'll talk more about Veeam in a few minutes and give you a bit more information about that. You can restore quickly to SherWeb Performance Cloud. We offer WAN acceleration, and maybe I hope that Michael will talk a little bit about that. WAN acceleration is an interesting technology. It allows for lighter and faster transfer of data between your on-premise Veeam and our infrastructure. We offer 24/7 support by a dedicated team of specialists. We can increase your backup reliability. You can have your own offsite infrastructure, obviously, but chances are it's not fully redundant as much as SherWeb Performance Cloud, which I'll talk about in a minute. Pay only for what you use, and then there's important components. So how does the billing work for our Cloud Connect product? So basically, you pay for the number of VM that you have with us, a price per month, and then you pay per gig of storage. The difference between us and other service providers is you only pay for what you use. So you don't have to know how much space you'll use exactly. We provide you with plenty of space, and then every month we'll look at how much of that space you're actually using and only charge you for that. Most providers will make you buy blocks, not the case with SherWeb. All of our products are in a pay-as-you-go model. We were really a true cloud provider and wanted to make sure that our backup offering was the same. There is no commitment. You don't have to sign up for a month. Well, probably will sign up for a month, but you don't have to commit for a year, 3, whatever. There is no upfront cost. There is no account opening cost. There is no setup fee. One thing about that usage, I said you only pay for what you use. Nice thing is, Veeam allows you to compress data. We only use what the final usage of that space. So that means that you get the benefit from that Veeam compression. Another important fact, you retain all aspects of backups. So the scheduling, the retention policy, the encryption, it all remains on your end. So for you, it is transparent. You're using your Veeam installation. You still have all the flexibility that you would have using Veeam. And you simply send it to us for storage. And I mentioned it, the free cold disaster recovery. So if you're not familiar with Veeam, let's take a few minutes and look at what it's like to provision a Cloud Connect provider, such as SherWeb, within your Veeam installation. It will also give you a sense of the Veeam control panel and how it works. So let me just switch out to the demonstration and get that started. So basically what you'll see today is we'll get into the backup and replication control panel. We will set a new service provider. We will set a backup job and execute it for the first time. So basically what you're seeing now is I'm opening the Veeam 9 control panel. This is what you would have at your client, or that you would be using as a managed service provider, as somebody that manages somebody's IT. So it's very, very easy. I simply go into the service provider section. I click to add a service provider. You would put in the connection string that was provided by SherWeb. You may see that here it writes yourcloudservers.com. That's basically our gray label URL. We want to make sure we allow you to be completely transparent in your usage of SherWeb. So if you don't want to reveal that SherWeb is your remote repository, we give you that gray label URL of yourcloudservers.com. If you want to name SherWeb to use our reputation to look good with your client, that's fine as well. So once you've added the connection, you simply put in the username and password that you were provided by SherWeb. And that's basically all there is to adding a service provider within Veeam. So you can now see you have your cloud repository. It has a capacity of 1 terabyte and WAN acceleration is enabled. So that's the final step to adding that account. Once that is done, most likely you'll want to start backing up machines to this new remote repository. So basically what you would go is go in your backup and replication, simply create a new job. So in this case, we're using Hyper-V. It works just as well for VMware. Maybe a quick word on that. 100% of all features, they all work with either Hyper-V or VMware, no problem at all. WAN acceleration, the compression, the encryption, all of that, seamless. If you want to restore to Performance Cloud, we can do it for both Hyper-V and VMware. If it is Hyper-V, it is a lot quicker because our own infrastructure is also Hyper-V, so there is no conversion process. If you have VMware, you have to allow for a bit more time. Usually, it really depends on the size of the virtual machine, but we'll have to convert the drive or the image from VMware image to the Hyper-V image. Just as feasible, we've done it a number of times for a number of clients. So as I'm creating this new backup job, basically I just select a different storage and select the cloud repository as you just seen in this demo. Once that is done, that's pretty much all there is to it. So I would simply click through the rest of the wizard, decide the schedule, see if I want to run it immediately as well, and then this will get going. That's really all there is to it. Veeam is well known, and I think a big part of its success can be attributed to the simplicity of the software. It is meant to be used by SMBs that have from I think if you have a client that has 1 host and 3 virtual machines, you can use Veeam, and we'll talk about how the licensing works, and you'll see that it aligns to that concept. But we, for example, are using it for thousands of virtual machines internally, and it works just as well. So the scalability is really there. It works really well. Just a reminder, if you have any questions, don't hesitate. You can put them in the Q&A section of the presentation. Let me just jump back to my presentation. So I've presented it. All of this is best case scenario. All this is blue skies and everything is great. Let's talk about a few of the things you should consider as you present Veeam Cloud Connect to your client. One thing to think about, as always with any cloud services, is the internet connection. So both in and out. So first of all, the seeding. So if your client has, let's say, a dozen terabytes of data stored, we've seen this with ad agency and advertising companies, marketing companies. They sometimes have a large, their current storage can be very, very large. That initial setup, you have to consider, are you going to do it over the wire? If people are in large metropolitan area, they often have very, very fast connection nowadays with fiber and everything, and that can be doable over the wire. But something to consider would be the seeding. We have a procedure for sending us hard drives. You simply send it to our data center. We'll be adding it to your account. And Veeam has all the functionality that you need to resume that backup. So basically, it will do the incremental. It will do the differential from when the original backup was done on those removable hard drives to when you get the Veeam Cloud Connect running. We've done it with a number of clients, worked very well, no real issue. It's a very efficient way to send a lot of data. I don't remember who said it, but never underestimate the bandwidth of a car full of hard drives. You can get a lot of data a lot quicker that way. The other way around is also true. You have to consider the time to restore. So if your plan is to bring the data back on premise and restore it there, which is fine, I'd say that's the most common use case, you have to consider that it will take the time to download it. You'll have to look at internet connection. And you have to consider that if you're in a disaster situation, do you have access to your main internet connection, or are you in rental office or things like that? This is true if you want to restore on-premise, not as important if you're going to restore to the SherWeb Performance Cloud. So I mentioned WAN acceleration. That can help as well as far as connectivity, especially if you have a bit of a slower connection. It will do caching and it will send less data over the wire. Another consideration is local hardware availability. If your plan is to restore locally, what are you going to restore on? If you have a disaster, the situation most likely dictates that you won't have the hardware that you currently have. You would have lost it in the disaster. If we're talking about just restoring from something like CryptoLocker or things like that, then your hardware is still available. If we're talking real disaster like floods, tornado, hurricanes, fires, any biblical situation, then you're really looking at making sure that you either have local hardware available or that you work with somebody like SherWeb that can restore that backup on its infrastructure. I mentioned encryption. So if you want to keep things completely inaccessible to SherWeb, you just have to turn on encryption within your own Veeam. The stuff is encrypted before it's sent over to SherWeb, which means that we don't have any view into it. You can have compliance and things like that that require it. Something to keep in mind. Not the downside, but the thing to keep in mind is if you do encrypt it, we cannot restore your machines within the SherWeb Performance Cloud unless you give us the encryption key. So something to keep in mind, maybe if you have a disaster or something like that, you don't have that encryption key anymore, that can be a problem. If you want to make sure that you're 100%, if you want to make sure you're 100% certain that you can restore, then I probably would leave encryption off. So these are just a few things to keep in mind as you're considering offsite backups. So what is Veeam Cloud Connect Replication? So first of all, it's something new, something we find pretty exciting. SherWeb is currently offering it on a bit of a case-by-case basis. You have to talk to your sales or your account representative, and most likely they'll talk to me. Basically, what it offers is you can have an image of your live server on SherWeb Performance Cloud, and that will be kept in sync at all times. It really brings down the RTO, RPO because those machines are ready to go. Obviously, it brings down cost a little bit because it immobilizes a little bit more resources, but it gives you machines that are ready to be turned on, and that can be a major factor. The other nice thing is the client has access to a portal. From that portal, they can trigger their own disaster recovery process. They can switch directly live to our infrastructure. Something to consider, it's not directly a backup strategy when you're doing disaster replication. It's more about availability, so you want to make sure that you can transfer over. Most likely, you won't have the same retention policy within those replication than you would have in a normal backup. Although, one thing that is nice with Veeam, you do have the ability to restore older copies, so you do have some checkpoints in time. It requires more upfront work to set up networks. So the big question is not so much the copy of those machines. That's sort of the easy part. It's made especially easy by Veeam. But it can be trickier to make sure that all the networks are set up. It's not impossible. It's as well thought out, and it does work well, but it is more work to set it up. Some dedicated VLAN has to be put in place. You have to make sure that your IPs are pointed in the right direction. Something general, we have a lot of partners that have a lot of experience, so they'll probably just be nodding their head or rolling their eyes when I say that. It's make sure you use DNS for everything with your client. It makes things easier. So if you want to repoint somewhere else in case of a disaster, if your clients clients are addressing the services and everything through IP addresses, it can become much more complex. If you're using DNS, it can be as simple as just making a little bit of a DNS update and everything will point over to the right site. Okay, available from SherWeb Performance Cloud as a custom setup, fixed pricing, fixed price per VM plus storage, similar model, but more expensive than just Cloud Connect. As I said, talk to your account rep. He can discuss replication with you. So maybe one of the survey question would have been, are you all SherWeb Performance Cloud partners already? Just want to touch briefly. I'm going to skip some of those slides just to not drag this on too long. But SherWeb offers infrastructure as a service. If you're looking just for backup, if your client has their on-premise equipment, they've bought it recently or is very specialized equipment or anything like that, they may not be considering a move to the cloud, and that's where Cloud Connect comes in. Basically, I'm going to take a second to talk about that because it's really the financial, or not the financial, but the business aspects. I want to help you draw more business from your client, increase that average revenue per user. There's a conversation to be had about cloud, especially in the case of infrastructure with every client. They fall mostly within two situations. One, they already have on-premise infrastructure. It is recent. It does the job. They've paid. They're not done paying for it. They're in no way interested in trashing it all, throwing it away. In those cases, the disaster recovery conversation comes in. Very easy to have it. If they have a lot of infrastructure that they just paid for, they'll want to have a disaster recovery plan. They'll want to make sure that they're on top of that. If that infrastructure that they have is dated, it's not doing the job, they're due for a refresh, then you should have the conversation about moving everything to the cloud. And that's where a lot of our partners are having a lot of success. You can talk about remote desktop services. You can talk about remote app, our database as a service, and then a very interesting thing for people that are running MS SQL database. So between those two things, usually you have a conversation with everybody. The third thing would be they have their infrastructure, but they're looking for extra capacity. Then you should talk about cloud as well. A few of our advantages. So we have all the advantages of the cloud. It is a true pay-as-you-go infrastructure as a service with hourly billing, easy provisioning through elasticity. We do Windows, Linux. You probably know SherWeb more as a Microsoft partner. But our infrastructure does Linux servers great. They work great. The performance is awesome. 5.9 SLA, and you can control everything through API access. How does it stand out from other provider, which is a very fair question. First of all, performance is in the name. That's where it stands out the most. That's the most negative feedback we received from people that were using other providers. They weren't getting enough performance out of the resources, especially when it comes to storage. We cure that. And we also have reliability, free migration support. Migration is always a big key. And we provide a lot of expertise and partners. So I was talking about performance. We have a whole study, it's 40 pages long, done by a third party that compares our performance to Azure and Amazon. This is just an example test. There's like 30 of them. This is for CPU of a small machine, 2 CPU, and we basically were 50% higher than the other providers. So quick high chart to see if you can read small numbers, but also to show that SherWeb, when it comes to performance and value, so this is a combination of price and performance, we outperform Amazon and Azure in most cases, the vast majority. I'm sure we have a few gearheads in our audience today. This is a quick view of how our infrastructure as a service is set up. We have a number of pods. Each pod looks like this. So basically, we want redundancy throughout the stacks, and you can see it here. Multiple internet service provider, multiple firewall, switch, all of our clusters and M+2 configuration. Actually, that drawing is a bit off. There should be 2 spares for each cluster. That means I can put one of my server down for maintenance, plus I can lose one to hardware failure, and you won't even notice as a client. You'll be migrated to live server, healthy servers. So this is bottom part, multiple fabric switch connected to multiple routes, multiple SAN controllers. All of our storage is SAN-based, enterprise grade. We don't use consumer grades, disks or storage or anything like that, like most of the big providers. It's all flash, unless specifically requested. All of the storage, anything that you run at SherWeb will be on SSD storage. Quick words about how we do maintenance and monitoring. So we do non-impacting maintenance, including to our Cloud Connect service. Regular maintenance, predetermined, we notice you 10 days in advance. We do our monitoring with a number of tools. For example, Veeam 1, which is our Veeam product, but PRTG and SCUM as well. Automatic alerts and escalation. Quick word on our customer service. This applies to our Veeam Cloud Connect offering and to our infrastructure as a service offering. We do free migration support, so we'll assist you with all migrations. We cannot do unilateral migration. We need your participation, but basically we'll be there to decide a plan, put a schedule in place, help you identify the tools that will help you to migrate. And by the way, and I know we have Veeam people on the call, but Veeam is a great migration tool. It's a great way to move virtual machines around. You can see it as one of the tools that we use on top of Hyper-V, Hyper-Cloud, Disk to VHD. We have 24/7, 365 dedicated support to our infrastructure products. That means phone, email, chat, whether it's Christmas or New Year's, you always have somebody there available to you. This is North American support. We haven't outsourced it. It is internal to SherWeb. They're 24/7, but they also have a 24/7 team of senior sysadmin to which they can escalate to. We have a partner-first approach. That's why you're here, obviously. And you can see a few of the benefits. We also offer managed services if you're looking to just focus on your core business and let us do the managing. So, all that being said, we have a couple more survey questions for you, and then I'll pass it on to our friends from Veeam. Obviously, those questions relate to Veeam, so we're curious to see how many of you are currently Veeam resellers. Any other product, not necessarily Cloud Connect clients. I just mean if you use any Veeam product with any of your clients that you've resold yourself, please. Actually, yeah, that's my second question. I'm crossing the flux. So this first question specifically, are you registered as a Veeam reseller? So we'll take a few more seconds. Actually, I guess we're done with that. So showing the results, we have a majority of people that are not currently Veeam reseller, which is what I was expecting. I guess you'll be glad for the next section as we give you more information about that. So the next question is, more specifically, have you used any of Veeam's products? So even without reselling it, maybe you came into a client, they already had it, or maybe you've started using our Veeam Cloud Connect. You probably wouldn't be on this webinar if you are already using it, though. So it's sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy. So we'll give you a few more moments to answer the question: are you using any of Veeam's products or solution? And even not just backup, if you're using the monitoring, please answer yes as well. Give you a few more seconds while I catch my breath. All right, let's move on. So what was the result of that? Oh, 50-50 split. So no, not only two people answered, we have plenty of answers, but I guess the crowd is divided evenly. So we can see that a few people that are not Veeam reseller are Veeam users, which is interesting. So without further ado, let me introduce Michael Stuparts, Senior System Engineer for Veeam.
Thanks, Jan. Let's move on to the next slide. But just kind of to start off at the high level and do a little bit of an introduction on who Veeam is. And so many of you guys haven't really used us, haven't used us as a partner or one of our resellers. I want to just kind of start about Veeam. So with Veeam, we're approaching actually the 200,000 customer mark. So we've been around for about 10 years now. And been really focused into the virtualization space, with our main product being backup replication, which is what enables the Cloud Connect, enables the local backup of virtual machines, but we also further branched out into a lot of other applications as well. So obviously going out there and trying to innovate with some of the newest things for virtual technologies, things like monitoring, also doing the Cloud Connect options, things also like physical backup are definitely something that's on our roadmap. We've announced that as well. Like I said, been around for about 10 years with some extreme customer growth, just really hitting some huge revenue strides over the past few years. I've been with Veeam for over 3 years now, and I've really seen the bookings continue to grow year after year. We have almost 40,000 partners, so we work with a lot of people out there. That's going to be our global number, and we do have about 10,000 different service providers, cloud providers, managed service providers, with SherWeb being one of our largest. So we definitely appreciate the partnership there, and they're looking to get with you guys and be able to use that Cloud Connect infrastructure that they've already set up and designed so perfectly so that you guys can leverage that for your customers and really provide that disaster recovery plan for them. You notice that our headquarters is in Bar, Switzerland. We do have offices all around the world, though. I'm located out of our Atlanta office, as well as Joel, who will be speaking in just a moment. But we do have also our offices in Phoenix, and our main support office is in Columbus. So it is headquartered inside of North America for our support. But again, you'll see some other ones outside of the world, in other parts of the world as well. All right, next slide, Gil. Just to kind of show a little bit more about our growth, obviously showing the number of customers, we're adding almost 4,000 customers a month. So that's a huge number to take advantage of. Some of these might be your customers as well as you guys go out there and add them into the Veeam product suite. Now, when we see that kind of exponential growth, the biggest concern we have is a lot of these customers have no DR plan. We found that out at the beginning of this webinar through that poll. Most people really have no idea what their disaster recovery plan is going to look like or what would actually happen if something disastrous did strike their environment. And so that's where we see this Cloud Connect becoming so viable. It's a really easy way. SherWeb's already done all the hard work of putting everything on the back end, making sure that their hardware is redundant. The software is going to be redundant as well. So it's going to allow you to use their infrastructure and just sell it right to your customers and make it as easy as possible for you. And obviously, it also gives the chance to branch out and find some of those new customers. As you find new clients, they might already have Veeam inside their environment as we're growing so quickly. As we look at who's a Veeam customer, who out there is using it, we work with anyone from the smallest mom and pop shops, maybe one person that's got one single host, something like that, maybe just a couple IT users, all the way up to some of the largest companies in the world. So we have almost 50% of the global 2,000 and 70% of the Fortune 500 are using some of our products. So we have a lot of customers out there from really small all the way to the largest ones. We actually just recently announced that number is higher than 193,000 now customers worldwide. We have approached the 200,000 customer mark, and we are actually doing a contest around that as well. So even one of your customers could win that contest. It offers some really cool prizes and things like that. We have really introduced ourselves as the leader in the virtualization space. That's really what our bread and butter is all about, is protecting virtual machines. You can see that with that 11 million virtual machines protected. So really just making sure that we have our spot in the market, and we're really going to focus on protecting virtual machines all across the world. We also have one of the highest leading customer satisfaction ratings. So if you compare this to some other companies, even big ones that you've heard of like Apple or Google or companies like that, we blow them out of the water as far as customer satisfaction. 3 times the industry average. So we really just have some of the best satisfaction levels. People really like the product. It is one of the easiest backup products you're going to find out there to use. And our sales team is always willing to help, as well as SherWeb can help you, with anything Veeam related as well. Next slide, Corey. As we talk about kind of what this next slide is going to be about, it's really about the fact that the business had some gaps inside of it. So as we it went out there and we were talking to our customers and we were designing the product from the ground up, we found out that people were virtualizing. It became something about 10 years ago, maybe even a little longer than that, where customers were really focusing in on that virtualization space. They were going to be upgrading to SANs, more modern storage, and obviously doing hybrid solutions where they had cloud virtual machines, on-prem virtual machines, and they had this situation where they were kind of outgrowing their old backup solution. We'll talk about that in just a moment. With these companies, we found that they're really focused on the ability to have no downtime. If people think about DR, they may not even have a plan for DR, they really don't think about the loss of money. On average, it costs a company $300,000 per hour of downtime. So there's a huge amount of money that's including cost of like employees and cost of what they would lose from revenue. So they haven't thought about what the repercussions would actually be if something went down. And so we wanted to develop a product that would help people have a minimal amount of downtime. We advertise less than 15 minutes recovery and time point objectives. So really small recovery time to actually get back up and running, get those virtual machines back where they need to be. We also found that most companies are now steering away from that 8 to 5 type approach where just those were the business hours, nothing outside of that was really happening. It allowed them to run backups all the time, or excuse me, all night. And we found that they're really moving towards the 24/7 operations. There's no downtime. There's really no option to back up. They've got offices all around the world that they're going to be needing to back up. And so that was our design goals from the product. They're also going to always have that growing amount of data. We obviously hear all these buzzwords with big data and things like that nowadays. And that growing amount of data is something that a lot of customers actually struggle with. And that's where Veeam also comes in with things like compression and duplication to help reduce down that footprint and make sure that the data size is as small as possible. So as we went into Veeam Availability Suite, which is the combination of our backup and replication product with Veeam 1, it really focused on 5 key features. The first one was high-speed recovery. And high-speed recovery isn't just for a full virtual machine. We do have features that will help for that, for like instant VM recovery on-prem. You can do high-speed recovery through the SherWeb cloud, through something like replication. But it also meant for things like file level recovery or application level recovery. And one of the really interesting things that we see with Cloud Connect Backup is that if you're just storing a backup file inside of the cloud, we can actually recover those directly from the cloud back to on-prem. So things like Windows files as well as application items like Exchange or SQL, they don't even have to pull down the backup. They're just going to pull down the piece that they actually need. So really making those recoveries as fast as possible. And we wanted to focus on data loss avoidance. So this is where the recovery point objective came into play. We wanted to make sure that backups were running as fast as possible. You could run things like every 15 minutes if the customer needed it, every hour. We wanted to make sure that you could avoid as much data loss as possible. There always has to be some data loss, right? Unless you were doing some sort of continuous replication. There is going to be some recovery point objective, but we really try and focus that to be less than 15 minutes where applicable. Now, another big thing is the verified recoverability. A lot of backup softwares will go out there and they'll test the backup just for any sort of corruption issues. And we have that built into our software as well, but we've taken it to the next step with something called SureBackup. This is something that would run local to where the backups are being taken. And this recoverability aspect is that we actually power on the virtual machine. We're then going to verify through ping tests and heartbeat tests and some other scripting tests that we can throw out there as well to verify that that backup is in a good state. So it's really going to the far extreme when it comes to being able to verify these backups and make sure that they're good for use. We also want to talk about leverage data. So we want to be able to take what's already on disk and leverage what we already have. So be able to not only report on some of this information, monitor on this information, but also use that when it comes to restores. So being able to do things like file level recovery or application recovery without ever having to power on a virtual machine. And lastly would be our complete visibility. And this falls into some of our other products more than backup replication. This is really the Veeam 1 or Veeam Management Pack capabilities where we can go out there, we can see everything in the environment. Our products are actually really robust as far as the alarms that they come built with. You can customize your own alarms, but it's going to give you everything you need to know about the virtual infrastructure, from things like CPU usage, memory usage, to disk speed and network speed as well. So that kind of helps to tell the Veeam story just a little bit better. And if you'll click on the next slide for me. Just a couple key points about Veeam. This is kind of where we started when it came to the backup product, and what I kind of consider to be some of the pillars that we use to identify ourselves from other backup solutions. Guillaume already mentioned that we are VM object-based. So we're going to be backing up the virtual machine as a whole image. So we're just think of it like a Polaroid picture that we take of the virtual machine. We have that copied in. We can use that. We have all the pieces that we need to recreate that. So whether that be virtual hardware, your operating systems, applications, maybe SQL databases, not only can we back all that data up, but we can also restore all those pieces as well. Another big thing is going to be the fact that we're completely agentless. So that's going to be no agents whatsoever on the virtual machines. Even if we're talking about Exchange, SQL, any of those applications, we never have to install any additional agents on those machines to get the granular level backups. We have some backup files that are going to be self-sufficient. So these backup files are going to have everything they need them. They're not stored inside of a catalog. So let's just say you had a complete disaster. The only thing that survived was your backup target. You can then take those backup files and restore them anywhere. So that's why it works so well going to the SherWeb cloud. You can restore those backups into that location. Depending on the hypervisor, there may be a little bit of conversion necessary. But it does mean that these backup files are completely standalone. And so even if you wanted to take these and put them on a USB drive and take them home with you every night, you have those options available. There is no real complex backup plans. The software is extremely easy to use. It is completely wizard-driven. You did see the interface just a little bit with this, so we were going through that demonstration earlier. But when you went through the setup of the job, you'll notice that everything is pretty much just the next finish type approach to the backups, making it as simple and as easy to set up as possible. Now, with these backup plans, they are just so simple, but you can select some pretty advanced things. So some automation can be done through these backup jobs. You can select an entire host to backup or clusters. So we always continue to adjust to things like new virtual machines being added, being removed, and any other adjustments may be happening on the fly. I mentioned earlier the agentless approach, that's not just for backup, but also for restoration. So if we're even talking about getting back like SQL log backup or anything like that, we can make sure that we have all that information so we can restore it back. I'm going to pass things on over to Joel at this point so he can talk a little bit more about the Veeam reseller program.
Sounds great, Stu. Thank you very much. Appreciate that, and appreciate the opportunity to be working with Guillaume and team at SherWeb. Just want to touch base really with you on a reseller program. You know, the latest poll has shown there were some folks that were reselling Veeam, and the majority of you were not. And I just want to make you aware of pretty simple from a reseller perspective to get involved with Veeam. We do work with folks like SherWeb from a managed service provider, but from a reseller perspective, there's a great opportunity for you here from the standpoint of the large partner base that we have out there, for one thing. Secondly, being able to sell to the end user, which is growing, and having an opportunity through Cloud Connect, like Guillaume was talking about for backup and also replication, gives you the capability to sell to the end user. They can run the backups themselves. They're going to look to get their backups off site, and that can be tied back to you and SherWeb and be able to offer them that service. The program itself is pretty easy to understand. If you go to our Veeam website and look at the reseller program, we also have folks out there on the cloud and service provider side of the house. But the reseller program is pretty simple. Get on our website. It's very engaging. We've got sales and marketing support that we can give to you. Predictable. What I mean by that is there are definite benefits and requirements for those benefits. I'll talk to you about that in just a second. And also the profitability standpoint of it, depending upon what level you are, depends upon what kind of margin you could be making off of that. So if you haven't considered that, definitely something for you to take a look at and evaluate. So to give you just an idea from a reseller's program, our silver partner or registered partner, you need to have one VMSP is a Veeam salesperson, which they have to go online, take the test, just so they know the product itself, and also one Veeam technical salesperson. Same type of a deal. We've got the no cost to you. It is a resource that's on our website, and just go through the modules, learn about the product more, take the test, and you're certified. So pretty straightforward. Next level will be gold partner. So for instance, same as the silver, but what you do have to do is generate net business, so at least 100K of net business to Veeam. You have to have 2 salespeople, 2 technical salespeople, and also 1 Veeam certified engineer, VCME. That is a certification that you can take with you as the person that takes the certification, but there is a cost involved in that. And you can get more information about that on our website. And then it increases up to our platinum partners, which is the gold requirements, if you will. But from a revenue perspective, you have to be at the $1 million level, if you will, net to Veeam, and 4 salespeople, at least 4 technical salespeople, and you have to have 2 VCME or 2 certified engineers. But the thing that's interesting about it is it gives you an opportunity to get into our program very simply, no cost again to you as a reseller. But as you grow your business and as you grow the revenue, there's more assets that you can utilize. Yeah, there are some requirements that we ask of you, but there also are marketing dollars and things of that nature to help you pull through the Veeam message, if you will. So if you just go to veeam.com, all the information is there on our reseller program. Or if you want further information, you get back with Guillaume or the SherWeb team. They definitely can direct you back to me, and I can get you to a resource to dive deeper into that. But it is something that gives you the opportunity to help grow your business and the different services you're offering and the different products that you're reselling, and a definite revenue opportunity for you too. So that's my commercial. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks, Joel. Yeah, I mean, there's so many positive aspects. It's hard not to sound like an infomercial.
Yeah, true.
All right, thanks for taking the time. So to talk about next steps for our partners. So basically, like I mentioned before, I recommend downloading the disaster recovery white paper that is in our toolbox and talk about your account rep to provision a VM backup account. That will really take just a couple of minutes. And then you could start offering disaster recovery solutions to your client. It is that easy. If you're not a Veeam partner, as Joel mentioned, you should be looking into becoming a reseller for them. That's what we've done as well. So if you want to contact us, the sort of generic information is here. I hope that everybody knows. Maybe that should have been a good survey question. Do you know who your account rep is at SherWeb? Hopefully you all know who your account rep is. If you have any questions, please just contact partner@sherweb.com and we'll get back to you very quickly. You can also call us. We're always available. So we got a couple of questions in the Q&A, and I'm going to take a few seconds to answer as many as I can before we... So one of the questions was about whether Veeam can do physical servers. It wasn't really touched on by Stu, but it is possible to back up physical servers with Veeam. Starting with Veeam, I think it was in Veeam 8, but it really is more supported with Veeam 9. They have something called endpoint protection, and it will allow you to back up physical servers. As it was mentioned, the bread and butter of Veeam and the reason that it is so successful is their focus on virtual infrastructure. If you have 100% physical infrastructure, maybe not a perfect fit. But I think that's less and less of the case that we have pure play physical setups. I see less and less when we talk to people. For hybrid scenario, I think Veeam is great, and for all virtual, it's the best. So one of the questions was, do we talk to our account manager to get a gray URL, so a gray label URL where SherWeb is not identified? Honestly, you don't even have to. By default, that's what we provide when it comes to Veeam Cloud Connect. It doesn't cost anything, won't take any longer. So when you get the URL to connect to our Veeam Cloud Connect, it will be gray labeled. So we have a question. So the Veeam software is not included from SherWeb in the software plus storage cost. We need to procure Veeam separately, become a partner with them. Is that accurate? That is accurate. So for the on-premise Veeam application that you're going to be running for your client that will allow you to do local backups, restores, and everything like that, that is for you to procure. Once you have that, you don't need to acquire any additional licenses. There is no complexity. You just need to use the Veeam Cloud Connect product and pay the per VM per storage price. We have some tools available to help calculate the amount of backups that you'll be using in Cloud Connect and how much that will cost you. That is also available, I think, in the toolbox, but if not, from your SherWeb partner. So on that, we'll have to stop here. I'm very glad everybody showed up. This was a very good webinar. Hopefully you got something out of this. If you have any further questions, and I see a few of the additional questions I haven't had a chance to answer, we'll answer you directly via email or from your account rep, but you will get your answer. If anybody needs anything, don't hesitate. That's what we're here for. Thanks again to Joel and Michael for participating in this webinar. Thank you very much. Have a nice day.